For those of you that just walked in, the first part we were just talking about growing up in Staten Island, education. So this is going to be on YouTube. We'll send out the link when it's all edited and done if you missed the first part. But the second part we're going to be talking more about, entrepreneurship, business, things like that, and family. So, but Bobby, so I want to talk about more about like how you started getting into entrepreneurship as a younger man, and then like growing into growing your businesses, trying to get money to fund businesses. I think it's very important for people to learn. I think that's something that that you have knowledge about, like coming from the neighborhood and then trying to get the money to start your businesses and get them going. So if you want to start talking about starting, when did you get the entrepreneurial bug? Is the question.
So I would say that my father and my mom, they both they both started their own businesses. My dad was, I believe, one of the first black car dealership owner on Staten Island, and I sort of I helped out at the at the business, and through that you get to see the challenges, you get to see the benefits, you get to see what it looks like to operate your own business. But it really wasn't until, while helping out at my dad's business, I was working in Doctor's Hospital, Beth Israel at the time.
What'd you do there?
I had 3 positions. I worked in radiology, I was in custodian, I also worked like the ambulatory, and I did all that to pay my way through college, right? So I had an opportunity to renovate, because that was really handy. So I had an opportunity to renovate a doctor's home in the Poconos. And, I did a good job, I guess, in word of mouth. It passed around to the other doctors. And from that point, I was able to, matter of fact, the business, so I started out, I employed maybe 3 or 4 individuals, and the callback for renovations for other properties was so much I had to hire more people. But I was probably about 21, and I wound up having about 10 individuals working for me.
Were you still in college at the time?
I was still in college at the time.
What college?
At College of Staten Island. I was freshman, as a matter of fact. And what happened was the business was doing much better than I expected, and I got to the point where I really couldn't even manage it, because I was doing school, and I was doing the home improvement part-time, but I really was I wanted the job security, so I remained at Beth Israel, doing the home improvement, and through that I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that if you work, and it's true, it sounds mediocre, but if you work really hard and you focus on what you're building, that you can be successful. So that business, which I didn't really think was going to be anything. I thought it was going to have
a side hustle.
Yeah, it was a side hustle, exactly.
Make some money on
Absolutely. And the fact that it grew, but the reality was because of the way that I dealt with people. I realized that the doctors knew that they could trust me with their space. It wasn't like I went to the Poconos and I was partying or hanging around or drinking. I wasn't into any of that stuff. I would actually do more than they expected of me, and I realized that every time that they would refer me to their friends. But on the flip end, I didn't have formal business, education or knowledge. It happened organically, so the business exploded, and I got overwhelmed.
So you learned by doing.
I learned by doing, and I got overwhelmed because I didn't know how to manage a staff of 10 individuals. And so I slowed it down. I said, you know what, let me get done with school. And I had to be crazy, so I was quadruple majoring because I overloaded myself again with credit. Graduated. I did that for my mom, by the way.
College?
Yeah, I did college for my mom because I think I've always had a knack for businesses. Even like with this space. I mean, this was all like a dream. Right. It came out of what I saw was needed in the community. We're always complaining about not having a place for the kids to go.
Right.
We're always saying, for instance, there are no black-owned arts gallery in this borough at all, right? And this was a big risk. I personally love arts. I'm a collector. You know, I collect some African art. I collect contemporary and different types of arts. But I thought to have a space like this that you can share with the community, share with young artists, has really opened up an opportunity, business opportunity as well, because we showcased Lyle, this was his first exhibit, and I did it because he's such a great.
Who's the artist?
Lyle, he's a Nigerian artist, the guy that did the a Beyonce video, Lemonade.
Oh, okay.
And I'm connecting this to entrepreneurs, show you how it works, how you can do more than one thing at the same time. So I met this young guy, very talented, and I wanted to support his career. So he said, I've never exhibited my works before, and I thought the work was amazing. And interesting enough, I had thought about opening up a space, like a multidisciplinary space like this, and he inspired me to actually accelerate the process, because I was just like, wow, this guy's work's got to be shown to the world. But at the same time, you know, the art business or the art industry is not an easy, you know, I mean, this is for like the super rich, you know, and you think in your mind that this is for opulence or whatever it is. But always doing things with trying to come to a solution. So I felt, how do we create space, that community that can bring young people, old people, everyone together? And how do we make that space where it's fluid and where it resolves some issues? So what we've done with this space is that you can come here for yoga, you can come here for art classes now. We've held many forums, police and community issues. Mask has had his meeting here, that's Mothers Against Senseless Killing. Occupy the Block has had recruitment sessions here. We've had health forums here. And every event we do, and I'm not bragging or boasting, it's packed. So that has defined and that has proven that there is a need for the space, right?
How long has the space been open?
It's just about a year at this point. We just did a year. We got a lot accomplished, and it hasn't been easy. I mean, I know it looks easy, but it hasn't been easy. It's been a challenge. We don't get grants. We don't have grants.
Are you a nonprofit? Or?
So Canvas is really a programming of Island Voice. So Island Voice is a non-for-profit. We've just sworn in our new board. But most of the funding, believe it or not, comes from me and people who believe in the programming. Like with the library shelves, that donation came, for instance, from Children Literacy Society, and a friend of mine that runs that organization, two friends of mine who are here, Lucille and Sophia. And it comes from, and when you talk about entrepreneurial, is figuring out how to make the most with whatever you have, right? So because we don't get grants and funding, you have to look into your network. So as an entrepreneur, always understanding that when you have a win-win situation, meaning that when the other person's benefiting, you're benefiting, you can come to a place where you figure out how to make things work. I always like to add a twist to that it helps in empowering the community. And what is empowering the community? Because you hear that word thrown around all the time. By having the books, the Williams Gibbons family, the books that they've donated to us, that's now going to give young African American, not just young African American, an opportunity to come here, to be in a safe space, right? To enrich themselves, read about stories about, you know, ancestors, blacks that went through harsher periods. And that hopefully that opens up their mind to then look at themselves and say, well, if it was that crazy then, and we are saying it's bad now, what were the lessons learned then? Or what were the tools? Or what were the organizing? Or what were the motivation then, I mean, of course it was freedom when you go, depending on when you go back. But we're also looking for some level of freedom now, economic freedom, for instance.
Do you offer some mentorship to go with that? Because sometimes, like,
always.
read something, it doesn't always like sink in. And
well, that's where
message.
So that's where Children Literacy Society, the partnership, makes sense, because we're actually going to be having workshops. So that, for instance, we may take a book and decide week one, we're going to review, for instance, how Frederick Douglass decided to go about dealing with economic challenges that he had, right? How, for instance, then did he, so Children Literacy Society will help us delve further into the lessons of each book. And we're probably gonna go chapter by chapter. We're still programming that all out. But you'll be able to understand how that happened, what happened, and how does that connect to now. And I think it's making the connection, that's the empowering aspect of it all. That if you can get a young person to realize that the struggle now isn't necessarily different from the struggle then you can empower a young person to find an alternative way to arriving at their goal. So as far as mentorship, I mean, because in the Black community, if you had an opportunity to be successful, the onus is on you, and it's an obligation for you to make yourself available for mentorship. I mean, I get calls from everywhere, right? And it's something that you're obliged to do, because my philosophy is this: if I can change and improve one kid's life within the community, that's another kid that potentially can improve several other kids' lives, right? If I can invest, for instance, in the soccer program, right? That's like a whole team in a way that has benefited from that. Those kids, out of those kids, one of them could wind up becoming a billionaire, who then says, I remember a gentleman who did this for me. I, in turn, now may give $1 million to a school. And it really happens in that way. I'll give you a simple example. Adewale Ogunyele, who played for the Chicago Bears, retired, got a $33 million deal. He grew up in Park Hill. He lived on the 6th floor from me. I was on the 3rd floor. And this guy used to follow me around all day. And he was one of the guys that I mentored. And I'm happy, that makes me proud. And we've gone on to donate year after year turkeys to 57, which was the school that we grew up in. So you can't be a successful entrepreneur if you do not give back to the community which you came from. You just can't. I mean, especially if it's an underserved community, because it's like everybody will think about it like this. Anyone that's successful, those who are from his old neighborhood always say, oh, we knew him, he was X, Y, Z, Z. And how relevant and how important is it to what you're doing, to what you're contributing back to the community? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like a full circle, right?
Just take and get back.
You can't. Even if you didn't take from the community, the fact that God has blessed you in such a way, and if you are spiritual, and if you do believe in God, or if you do believe in karma and the philosophy of life, you understand that you have to replenish. There has to be a circle, and that's the circle of life. So the interesting, when you talk about entrepreneur, like, I always feel that it isn't always about, it is always about profit, but it isn't always about profit. There's a way to make a profit, but also doing social good. And I think that's the balance that I've always tried to bring to anything. Even when I opened up a lounge, Notes Lounge, I always made it available to non-for-profits to come in and hold meetings there. We would give special rates to different organizations, because you know what? That's community, you know? And it made sense. The more you give, the more people are willing to come back and support. And it's each one teach one. You know, all of these adage, like some of these are in parables. Each one teach one. Each one teach one. That means each person has the ability to teach another person. And then in turn that continues. It's like it's the sense of a village, you know. Like, you know, my parents are from Africa. I've had the opportunity to live there and grow up there. And it's amazing, you see the way that the village really does take care of itself. And I think we did that back in the day as well, because I remember growing up, you always wanted to make sure that if you were doing anything wrong, your father's friend or your uncle or whoever didn't see you doing it. Yeah, because it's not only will they tell, but you'll wind up in trouble right then and there, or you'll wind up being embarrassed right then and there. You know, and I think it's sort of lacking these days. I think adults are afraid of young kids, and young kids have let me not broad brush, some have become truly unruly to the point where the values have been lost. So again, back to the books. I think by having such rich books in culture and heritage, I think we need to get back to that, because that stuff is lost in, when you think about social media.
Most cultures, it's lost nowadays.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're living in an age where information can be manipulated very easily, right? So you think about hacking in terms of what happened during the politics. But when you get back to the books, the facts are there. It's as it was written. You know, you can see it for the way it was intended. You know, and I think there's power in that. I think there's power in going back to basics. And I think, you know, even they're saying that the books, the publishers are saying that there are more books being published now. It's not fading away. They thought, what was that thing, that pad that they thought were going to?
Kindle.
Kindle. They thought Kindle was going to fade away books, but that's not the case. And I think we're going old school with it also, in a sense that we are helping to preserve a culture. And I think it's great that St. John's University is partnering with us to help us digitalize it so that it's available in that space as well.
You're taking the books and digitalizing them themselves?
And we are going to have a librarian from St. John's University that's going to be helping us out to ensure that we treat it in the way that, you know.
Because now a lot of information is for free online.
That's right.
Even college, people think you need to go to college, but you could actually, you know, go to edX and find courses online, and, you know, from Harvard even, and schools like that. So, but, you know, something I really, you know, notice about you, and I'm a young father, my son's 6, is, you know, how successful your 3 boys are and what they're doing. And to me, it's very important, fatherhood. So just like seeing the heroin going on out here and everything that is crazy, I want to make sure he stays away from that, and he gets good values, things like that. So, like, how did you instill good values in them? How did you keep them away from, you know, from bad influences, the terrible drug culture that's going on, things like that?
They used to get a good butt whooping. All right. Look, I used to get a nice butt whooping. You know, I even remember going back to 49, when I went to 49, back, I'm talking in the 80s, some of our deans would actually use a cane. And you couldn't talk about it. Oh yeah, they would use a cane. You couldn't go home and say why you got caned. You know, you'd rather, listen,
They throw you in jail.
Well, so, I mean, I was raised in the old-fashioned way, like spare the rod, spoil the child, you know, that philosophy. So to answer your question, I've developed, I really wanted to be a better father than my father first. And in doing so, I wanted to make sure that, and I said make sure, my sons are still growing, but I want to make sure that I do everything, I always say in 3 parts, to the best, to know that I gave to them the things that I didn't have growing up in Park Hill and Stapleton. So that's traveling, for instance, experiences beyond like just regular, you know, delving into arts, music, you know, whatever it is that they're interested in. We have a conversation about it. Let me go back. We read the Bible like as often as we can every night. So because
that shows the that's showing the values.
Yeah. So, you know, that sets the tone. All right. They understand that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Right. they know the stories, the parables, and how that relates to every day. Like, what does it mean? We read the Bible and we say, what does this mean to you in today or tomorrow, right? So they understand that. The other thing is that I learned to listen. I listen to them, you know, like before you get that butt whipping, or if you're gonna get that, why did you do what you did, or what does it matter? Or why does it matter that you didn't do this or didn't do that? So you have to reason, you have to talk to your children. That's really important. So I do talk to them, and I constantly reiterate sort of the experience that I went through and why it's important for them to know the value of an education, right? To know the value of, if you start something, try to complete it. And to know the value as well of the sneakers, the clothes, and all of that. I teach them economics. Like, they've been learning that stuff since they've been real. So I think it's important very young to instill certain values in kids. So conversation is what we do. I try to put myself in their shoes, but at the same time, you know, it's a father-son relationship, so you gotta understand, you know, there's a limitation to what you can do. But as far as the drugs, my eldest son, who's 16 now, you know, actually had a near scare situation, you know, last year of high school, and his peers were, you know, smoking marijuana and so on and so forth. And, you know,
so he's still in high school, and he's not?
No, he's graduated. He goes to NYU now.
He's 16?
He's 16, yeah. But I wanted to talk about the drug. You have to, when we were growing up, it was just say no. Right. Or, you know, there were these slogans that we, exactly, there were these slogans that we grew up with. And I think it's important that parents, you have got to understand what your children are doing, what's going on with them. And if you gotta go in that school bag, go in that school bag. You know, if you gotta go in that phone, go in that phone. Right. You know, when I was growing up, your parents had all the rights. I knew that, and it was in your best interest. So with my kids, I give them a lot of respect, but I let them know, look, I could show up in your school, I could be in your phone. I wanna know who your friends are. Right. I wanna know what they're doing, what are their aspirations. And I think it's, as a parent and as a single father, as a matter of fact, as a single parent, you have to work twice as hard. Do
you think that could backfire? Like, some kids are rebellious and they'd be like, you know, try to rebel even more because you're pushing them more?
Look, you're either gonna raise your children or the streets is gonna raise your kids. Right. You know, so you think about it in that way. Like, and here's the other thing. Are you gonna do it now, or are you gonna do it later when there's more resistance? Right. So the sooner you lay the foundation, the better and easier it is. Like with my sons right now, I'm like, guys, we gotta go do X, Y, Z on a Saturday. They know that, well, we gotta put that time in there. Right. Because at the end of the day, you're putting yourself in a safe space, right, and you're also enriching yourself. So you have to, hands-on parenting is critical, because there's so much distractions out there, so much peer pressure, and we're fighting all of those negatives out there as parents. And if you're not proactive, a good kid can turn bad quick, you know, like that, because it's a matter of the peer pressure. Your children are struggling with conforming, and if they're in their teenage, they have chemical imbalances and so on and so forth. You know, they have chemical balances that they're going through. I'm being told I gotta wrap up.
Actually, it's a good note to wrap up.
Yeah.
But very quickly, I noticed like you bring your sons into a lot of your own social projects that you're working on.
Yeah.
So just touch on that quickly. But one of the things I noticed is when the whole Garner thing was going on,
yeah, like
you pushed your kids into like working with police and
yeah,
you know, a police program, things like that.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you why. So growing up, the way we grew up, we really, and not because we didn't want to, we didn't see the police as a positive, you know. We didn't see the police as individuals that were there for us. This is keeping it real. Growing up in Park Hill, you only saw the police come over there to arrest, to put a stop to whatever's happening. That was all you saw. PAL was much later. Like we didn't really have PAL. So that was what you saw, and you got to think about the conversation that goes on in the community. It's like you hear such and such, and there was a lot of, and there is still is, there's a lot of injustice in these communities that are carried out not by all officers, but by the bad apples who are in there. And because the community is not empowered or educated enough, let me not say educated enough because that's a bad word, but not aware of sort of the tools that are available for them to go and ensure that there are checks and balances. So there's this culture of helplessness that we can't, so that's what I grew up from out of. And fortunately, having grown up and being more successful and being a business person and having exposure and opportunity to engage and see the other side of law enforcement, I want my children to understand that if you're standing on your right, you have nothing to fear, be worried about. And I think it's empowering for them to also be in a space where they can engage law enforcement in a different light.
Right. Not just a negative.
Not just a negative. And that's actually what I promote. I've been promoting that for over 15 years in the community. Some people look at me back in our community like, man, you're too close to the officers. Are you sure you're not? That's sort of the risk that I ran. But I felt and I feel and I believe that we all have to take part in trying to change, the culture of this police brutality, gun violence, and so on and so forth. Because you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. So you got to pick the side that you want to be on. So. And that's why it's important for me to have my sons and my children see it, because you can tell kids whatever you want, but when they see and experience it, that has a lasting impression.
All right, so let's finish up just one more thing. So just, one piece of advice you would give to a young father.
A young father, wow. Pray, breathe, try to take time to really think through every decision that you make. I know it's hard, but and always try to put yourself in your children's shoes. Actually, that helps give you an understanding, and they grow quick. So give that time. Very, very important. And that's why I take my boys everywhere, because you know what? If I can't be at their game or be somewhere because then they're going to be with
you.
Yeah.
See what you're doing.
So it's important. Yeah. So the time is spend time with your children. I think that's the advice. Spend time with your children. Definitely spend time with your children.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot. Great job. Thank you.
We just really need to change the narrative of what Staten Islanders are. So I'm really hoping that that's the big takeaway from this as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you.